everyone, it's Shar. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. I have never done this video before and I'm so excited to do it. I'll tell you that for the past year or so that I've had my channel, I've seen these videos and I loved watching them. I feel like something that I often search, especially if I really love a book, but I was like, I don't know how I could do this. Like, how do I figure out if this book is like this one? And I'm happy to say that for this video, I have 10 books for you that I think if you liked this one, you would like this one, or vice versa. So without further ado, I'm gonna jump on in and tell you the 10 books that I think if you like this one, you would like this one. My first book is Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This book follows a young girl who is living at a home essentially for like orphan children. So she lives there, and one day she receives a letter from an uncle she has never heard of who says, "We've been waiting for you, come to Gallant." So she does go to Gallant, but no one's expecting her. No one knows who she is. The only living family member that she has is her cousin, her uncle's son, and her cousin's not doing so hot. The house is not doing so hot, and the people are struggling. This cover tells you a lot. This is a portal fantasy book. It is YA, but it does read a little bit young. I loved all of the gothic energy in this book, and if you liked Gallant as well, I think you would love And the Trees Crept In by Dawn Kurtagich. And the Trees Crept In has a very similar gothic energy, very similar beautiful writing style, lots of lyricism in here as well. It is just gorgeous. It's gothic fantasy as well. So And the Trees Crept In follows two young sisters who have just run away from an abusive household. The only place that they know to run to is to their aunt's house in the woods. They arrive at their aunt's house and everything is great. Their aunt is loving and doting, but as time goes on, their aunt slowly starts to retreat and slowly starts to go mad. Their home is surrounded by forest, and every single day the forest line gets closer and closer to their house. There is a story of a tall and creepy spirit that haunts them, and ultimately this book is not what you think it is. And also the font style, you pay attention to it and you're reading to it physically, there's like all of these poems mixed in. There are letters and things that are bolded or italicized, and if you put them together, they give you a beautiful poem. And I just really loved this story, and I think that if you liked one of these books, you would like the other. My next book is Take a Hint, Dani Brown. This is part of Talia Hibbert's Brown Sisters trilogy. In this book, we are following the middle sister, Dani. Now, Dani is a witch. She is a professor at a university in England, and she has this kind of like flirty relationship with one of the security guards in her building, but it doesn't come to anything. He's just a security guard on campus. They do a little flirt, a little banter, and they go about their days. Until one day there is a fire drill, but Dani's not aware that it's a drill. So she is like panicking. She ends up getting in an elevator. The fire drill goes off, or the fire alarm goes off. She gets stuck and she absolutely panics, and Zaf, our security guard, runs up to save her. He bursts out of the building carrying her in his arms, and that causes a huge publicity thing because people love that story. They eat it up. It's all over Twitter. They have a hashtag, and Zaf actually has a nonprofit that he runs for talking about mental health for young boys in sports, and he thinks this publicity could really be great for his charity. So he asked Dani to kind of play along with him. Dani agrees because she really wants to get into Zaf's pants, and they start fake dating for the media, but of course fake feelings lead to real love. I love the romance in here. I love the emotional complexity and conversations about mental health, and this book is also very, very steamy, and the writing style is just 100% to my taste. If you loved or liked Take a Hint, Dani Brown, I think you would really like While We Were Dating by Jasmine Guillory. While We Were Dating follows the story of Ben and Anna. Ben is an advertising executive. Not really, but he works at an advertising company, and he is pitching a campaign because he gets the opportunity to do so. He ends up landing the campaign, and the star of the campaign is Miss Anna. And Anna is a mega famous movie star who is vying for an Oscar. Ben and Anna have immediate chemistry. Much like Dani and Zaf, they want to bang. And They do. They do quite a bit. This story is about them and their relationship and how they like come to accept that attraction between each other and like crossing that professional boundary. But also Anna wants to get an Oscar and people actually really love Ben. So her agent is like, you and Ben can fake date and this will be great for your image. So they fake date. Fake dating leads to real feelings. They of course fall in love. Ben struggles with his mental health and his history with his family, and Anna also struggles with anxiety. So we also have mental health representation in here and emotional complexity. It is just as steamy as Take a Hit, Dani Brown, and I definitely can see the parallels between these two books. If you liked one, again, you would like the other. Whether you read this one, then read this one, or if you read this one, then read this one. All right, I'm not gonna lie to you, my next one is kind of cheaty, but just a little bit. This is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. So People We Meet on Vacation follows the story of Poppy and Alex. Now, Poppy and Alex have been friends since they were in college, I believe like freshman or sophomore year. They met up, and every year for the past 10 years, they have gone on vacation. But where the story starts, they haven't done that in a while, and Poppy and Alex haven't spoken in a long time. Poppy is starting to feel a little bit lost in life, and she is feeling just like not herself. She's not feeling satisfied or happy with where she's at. And the last time that she was happy was with her best friend, Alex. So she decides to be vulnerable, message Alex, tell him that she really misses him, and asks to go on one more vacation. Alex agrees, and this is the story of them taking vacation, how their friendship formed, what happened to make them stop speaking, and it is friends to lovers perfection. I absolutely loved it. The story has things where it does like present moment and then we flash back to a moment in the past, and it just builds a relationship really, really, really well. A comparison that I can draw for you is Love in Other Words by Christina Henry. This is a little bit cheaty because I haven't finished this book. I'm only halfway through it. But the reason I'm putting it on this list as my little hair continues to stand straight up is because I was doing a read of this for a Fates and Favorite readathon hosted by Riley from Riley Marie on her Patreon. And my match was telling me that she had just finished People Meet on Vacation based on my recommendation, and she can see so many parallels, and it reminded her so much of her pick for me, Love in Other Words. Now, I can definitely see that parallel because in Love in Other Words, we are also following two friends, and they have stopped speaking when this story begins. So in Love in Other Words, we have our main female character Macy. That's probably not right, but she is our main female character. She has not spoken to her best friend, the love of her life, Eli, in a or Elliot? Eli? I don't remember. I'm so sorry. It's either Eli or Elliot, okay? She hasn't spoken to him in a really long time, but one day she is talking to her best friend at lunch, and she's playing with her best friend's baby, and who walks into the coffee shop but her childhood love, her childhood best friend, Eli/Elliot. He walks in, and that brings up so many feelings because they did not leave on good terms, and she feels a lot of personal responsibility because she is the one that pushed him away and cut that relationship off. And this story is about them, and much like People We Meet on Vacation, we are going between present moment and the past moment, understanding their friendship, where it started, where it led, and how it led up to the moment in the present where they are no longer speaking. It is also friends to lovers. It has so many similarities with People We Meet on Vacation that I can easily say pick one up if you're looking for another book that reminds you of People We Meet on Vacation, or you read Love in Other Words and you're wanting to keep that same energy. Now we're moving into a different genre, and I'm going to talk about Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Home Before Dark by Riley Sager follows the story of this young woman who is a house flipper, and her father was a famous author. Her father passes away, and she ends up inheriting the house, which she had no idea he even still owned. She's always been very curious about this house because the book that he wrote was actually about their house and how it was haunted and how they ended up having to flee in the middle of the night. She doesn't have any memories of that ever happening, and she feels like her dad was a big fat liar, but she needs to know for herself whether or not there was truth in that story because he never said to her that it was fake. He always stayed adamant the fact that this was a true story. So she goes back to the house to flip it, and while she's doing that, she starts to encounter some very paranormal, weird things going on in the home. She's having odd flashbacks and odd kind of hallucinations. She's trying to understand more of what's happening and really trying to understand whether or not her father was lying about this book, because she also lived in the house and she does not remember anything in that book actually happening. It's mixed media, so we have her going through her experience in this house, but we also get chapters of her father's book. The parallels between these two books are a little bit looser. I think they more so have the same energy of like a haunted house. You think it might be haunted, but maybe it's not. It's creepy, it's atmospheric. You don't understand the characters' like motivations and sense of why write this book, what exactly is happening, what really happened in this time. And so I'm going to loosely recommend to you The Writing Retreat by Julia Parts, because I feel like they have similar energies, not 100%, but for sure there is still a haunted house element. We still have people who are trapped in the home. We still have people who are having visions and experiencing things that they can't be sure are real. We have this element of mistrust. The Writing Retreat goes a little bit more off the rails. So let me tell you what it's about. In this book, we are following a woman who has just won the opportunity to go to a writing retreat with a famous feminist horror novelist. Wow, that was really hard to say, with feminist and novelist. But she gets the opportunity to do that. But her best friend, her ex-best friend, also gets the opportunity to do that. And their relationship is hella tense. They do not like each other at all, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So they go up to this house, which is notoriously haunted, and they go up for the opportunity to do this writing retreat. It's a very small and intimate setting. I believe there's only 5 women here, and then there's Rosa, the author, who is leading the retreat. Now, someone goes missing. There's a snowstorm. They're isolated and trying to figure out what's happening, and Rosa's behavior gets more and more erratic as the story goes on. Like I said, loose parallels, but same energy, same vibe as Home Before Dark. So if you liked Home Before Dark, I would say check this one out and see how you feel. My next recommendations for you is a very popular one, and this is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. So in Heartstopper, we are talking about Nick and Charlie. I can't remember who's who, but they are in high school in the UK, and one of them is being bullied. The other one is a football or hockey star. He's in some kind of sports team. You know Heartstopper, okay? You know the summary of Heartstopper. They fall in love, they come to a relationship, it's coming of age. One of them is exploring their sexuality and really coming to understand that perhaps he's not straight. It's about them and their friendship and how they fall in love. It's very cute, it's very well known. I do really enjoy it. So my recommendation for you is that if you loved Heartstopper, I recommend that you check out Cheer Up, Love, and Poms by Claire Fraser. This is also a graphic novel, and in this one we are following a young girl who is in high school and she wants to apply to college. She's talking to her college counselor, or her high school counselor. Her high school counselor tells her, you may have great grades, but you have no extracurricular activities, no involvement, and that's gonna be a struggle for you when you're applying for universities. And her mother says, you're joining the cheerleading team. So she joins the cheerleading team, where her best friend, who they no longer speak, is the cheer captain. Her best friend is a young trans woman, and we learn more about their relationship and more about our main character, who's the head of the cheerleading team, and what it's like for her to be the first trans cheerleading captain, the discrimination that she faces, the pressure that she feels to perform femininity, her struggle to find acceptance and belonging, and her sense of identity. And this is very found family, very strong friendships, very cute romance. It is sapphic in nature, and I just really loved this book. It gives me all of the same cozy, sweet energy. It's just so beautiful, and if you haven't read it, please read this book. It's so good. And back to horror, because who said I should keep the genres in order in this video? I'm gonna talk about Come Closer by Sarah Gran. This is a possession story. In this book, we are following a woman who lives with either her fiance or her husband in this recently converted loft. She's hearing weird things in the night, like tapping, like odd drips, and she's starting to feel like she's losing her sense of of reality, and her behavior is changing and she's losing time, having gaps in her memory. And as we progress throughout the story, there's always these little kind of snippets of a quiz of like, are you possessed? As she gets closer and closer and closer to full demonic possession. It is an absolutely wild story, but I had such a good time with it. The nature of possession stories really creep me out, and that's what I really enjoyed about this book. So if you also enjoyed Come Closer by Sarah Gran, I'm recommending that you check out If You See Her by Anya Alburn. This is also a possession story. In this book, we are in Michigan, and we're just outside of Detroit in the 90s with 3 young teenage boys who are goofing around, bored out of their minds, and they go to a haunted, abandoned home in their very, very, very small town, because what else is there to do? So they go there. One of the boys sees a woman in the window. He just gets very bad energy from the house. He refuses to go in, so his 2 friends go in without him, and the next thing that happens, this isn't a spoiler, by the way, this is the setup to the story, but just to be careful, feel free to skip ahead by like 15-20 seconds. The next thing that happens is that he hears a loud bang. One of the boys runs out, and what the situation ends up being is that their friend has jumped off of the balcony in the home and taken his own life. Where this story begins is 30 years after that. The 2 remaining boys are now grown men with family, and one of them visits the other and says, I really need closure. Can we go back to the home? So they do, and let's just say the woman in that window was potentially there. This story is about possession of our main character and his slow obsession with the home, and how this possession actually ends up taking over his entire life as well. It changes his behavior, it alters his memories, it alters his understanding of time. He becomes completely obsessed with this thing and feels like he has no control over his thoughts, his behaviors, his actions. Possessions, again, creep me out. This possession was truly terrifying. So these 2, same energy. Then I'm gonna talk about another romance. Say hello to Zeny. Zeny by Rebecca Weatherspoon follows Zeny, who is a young woman in her early 30s, late 20s, whose aunt has just passed away. Zeny was always super, super, super close to her aunt, so she's absolutely devastated by this news, and she goes to New York to help arrange her aunt's funeral. While she's there and after the funeral, she gets the notification from her aunt's lawyer that her aunt has left her everything. All of her money, all of her estates, all of her homes, everything now belongs to Zeny. But there's a condition. Zeny cannot actually take any of these things. She cannot claim them until she fulfills her aunt's dying wish, which is that she marries a Scottish musician who was her aunt's close friend. Said musician agrees to this because Zeny's aunt left him $100,000, and he has the same conditions as Zeny. He will get the 6 figures as soon as he marries Zeny. So they agree. It's a marriage of convenience, and this is about them exploring their grief, but also coming to fall in love and dealing with emotions like resentment and anger, family secrets, family history, their own trauma, and just them falling in love. It is very, very, very steamy, but I loved it, and I think that it's very well balanced in its storytelling. My recommendation for you, if you enjoyed this book, is Change of Heart by Claire Lydon. This story, also like Zeny, has a lot of emotional depth and a lot of emotional complexity. We're also dealing with grief in this. So in the story, we are following a young woman whose parents are having a huge wedding party, and the wedding party is very difficult for her because her family is very involved. There are things that they refuse to talk about, and she ultimately just does not want to go alone. So her friend tells her about this dating agency where essentially fake dating. It is out of work actors. They get hired to be there, whatever the other person needs at whatever event that they're going to. So she reluctantly agrees, and she ends up with an actress who takes a job and goes with her to pretend to be her girlfriend at her family's wedding party. While they're there, of course, like any fake dating story, fake dating leads to real love. So these 2 do end up developing feelings feelings for each other and falling in love. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of conversation around grief here. We have a lot of discussion around anger and trauma and resentment, just like in Zeny. There is some sex in here. There is that beautiful like atmosphere, and this is also actually set in the Scottish Highlands, so you get to have that atmosphere as well in that setting. I can see the comparisons between these two. I think they're both great, and you will enjoy one if you enjoyed the other. For my 7th recommendation, I'm going to talk to you about Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kristen White. I think that's right. So The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein is a Frankenstein retelling, but instead of it being from Victor's Frankenstein point of view and talking about his monster, we're hearing about Elizabeth, his wife, and what it was like for her to see her husband do these experiments and to realize that her husband is perhaps losing his ever-loving mind. I really enjoy this story because Elizabeth is a very, I don't want to say conniving, she plans a lot. She has a lot of plans for what it is that she wants and how she has to manipulate things to get into it. So we talk about how she and Victor ended up together, how she's had to learn to manage Victor's temper and Victor's kind of narcissistic personality and God complex, and her understanding of what exactly he's doing and how he is bringing these monsters to life. It is very gothic, it's very dark, and I just really loved it. I think the strength of the book is its character, and a book that has a very similar gothic, dark, heavy atmosphere to it with very strong character development is Malice by Heather Walter. This is a fantasy novel. It is a Sleeping Beauty retelling, but instead of falling in love with the prince, Sleeping Beauty, Aurora, falls in love with the evil sorceress. Malice is an in-depth character exploration in the same way that The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein is a character exploration. In this book, we are following Alice, who lives in this fairy tale-like world where there are actually fae and magical powers, but her powers are dark, and because of that, she's been ostracized. She is one of the only, if not the only, dark fae, and even though people hate her and make her life miserable, they still utilize her services. And we are following her perspective as she eventually snaps. What leads Alice to become the maleficent character we know her as, this big, beautiful, vengeful dragon. In-depth character exploration, dark, lots of time in the character's head, lots of world building, very gothic in its nature, and I just think that these two books have a very similar, not writing style, but if you like the writing of one, you would like the other, and their energy and their atmosphere and their darkness, very, very similar. I know this book wasn't well loved by everyone, but I did enjoy this book, and that's One by One by Ruth Ware. And in this book, we are following a group of people who are coming together. They work together on this app that's essentially like Spotify, but you can hear or tune into anyone's playlist at any given time. So say like you want to know what Taylor Swift is listening to. You could tap into Taylor Swift playlist and you can listen to the music at the same time as her. If they're listening to music, you can go to their account and you can listen to the same songs that they're listening to at the exact same time. These people go up to a ski trip, like a ski retreat for their workplace, but everyone is keeping secrets. Everything is dark. It is an isolated closed circle murder mystery. It's a thriller in the way that people die one by one. It's inspired by And Then There Were None. I enjoyed this book, and I think the strength of this book is its very snowy setting with that isolated mystery and that thing of people dying one by one. My recommendation for you is, if you liked One by One by Ruth Ware, you should read Breathless by Amy McCulloch. This book, as you can see, even has a similar cover. It is the story of a journalist who used to climb mountains, but she had this big failure. She hasn't done it in a long time, and she is struggling in her career until this super famous mountaineer climbing guy, very, very well known, is doing a summit tour. That's not right. I don't know that lingo. Anyway, he's doing that, okay? And he's on his final mountain, and he reaches out to her and he says, hey, I want you to write the article for me. I've never done this interview. You'll have this opportunity, but my condition is that you have to climb this mountain with me as part of my expedition team, because what's inspiring me to hire you is that I read this article that you wrote called Failure to Summit, and I think that you can do it. So it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She agrees and she goes up. But everything is not what it seems, because as soon as this book starts off, we have a death, and she is starting to wonder what is going on. Why are these people dying? In the atmosphere, very little oxygen, super cold settings. The threat is not just the person, the threat is also the weather and the environment and how it affects your mind. And I think it has very similar parallels to One by One. And my final recommendation for you, it is only fitting that I end on a romance, is Something to Talk About by Meryl Wilsner. This is a sapphic romance that I've read a couple of years ago about a famous person in Hollywood. I think she's an actress or a director. Very famous person in Hollywood and her assistant. One day her assistant goes onto the red carpet and she's helping her out with something. Of course, people are photographing everything. The media and the people like start speculating that these two are dating. Of course they are not, but there is chemistry there. There's a spark there. And this book follows the story of them, how they work with each other, and them, that chemistry that they have, and them exploring that chemistry and falling in love. I really enjoyed this book. I absolutely love their relationships. I love the age gap. I love the Hollywood setting, the dynamic, the spotlight being on them. I just really enjoy Hollywood romances. My inner fangirl is squealing. So I really love this book. I gave it 5 stars. And up until this point, I hadn't read another book that had the same energy and feeling, but I did recently finish Stars Collide by Rachel Lacey. Now this book and Something to Talk About, I think, have very strong comparisons. So Stars Collide by Rachel Lacey follows the story of 2 pop stars. We have one mega famous pop star who has this very long musical career. She's been a musician since her debut at 16 years old, and she is on her After Midnight's tour. But her sales aren't doing so well, and the media has kind of ripped apart her album, saying that she's lost her spark, that she's lost her passion, that it's not what fans are expecting, that perhaps her star is fading. And Eden, our main character, she's not gonna stand for that. She's like, I am that bitch. I've always been that bitch. So when her agent suggests that she brings on Anna, a rising pop star that has like a huge dedicated fan base, Eden reluctantly agrees. So Anna and Eden work together to have a surprise duet during Eden's Grammy performance. And of course, people love it. People eat that shit up. They're like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. And Eden ends up hiring Anna to be her opening act for her After Midnight's tour, which is a big deal because Eden hasn't had anyone open her show since her last tour, Daylight.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
Anyway, besties, so they agree and Anna's so excited. She decides to be the opening act. And of course, as they are going around and they're touring the country for these huge stadium tours, Anna and Eden develop feelings for each other, and Eden starts to explore more of her sexuality, her understanding of why she hasn't had the passion that she writes these songs about, and like what it means for her identity and her previous relationships, and her coming to fall in love with Anna. And it is just so freaking cute. I loved the whole touring and stage and music, and then both being like famous pop stars, Eden being very familiar with the Hollywood spotlight, and as much as she loves her fans, also knowing that she has to protect herself from situations because fans don't always view her as a person and don't have, in the sense that they don't respect her boundaries. They have no problem like grabbing at her and pulling her and mobbing her. And Anna doesn't know that. Anna is a smaller pop star and she has a huge dedicated fan base, but she's never experienced the dangerous side of stardom. These two come together. There is an age gap, not a large one, but a significant one. It's about 9 years. And I just fucking loved it. My inner fangirl was squealing. And while Miss Eden does remind me of a certain someone, the author has very openly stated that Eden is not anyone specific. I did love this book. I think that if you enjoy something to talk about, you would really like Stars Collide, especially if you are also someone who loves Hollywood romances and you want your inner fangirl to also squeal and have a good time. But with that said, that does bring us to the end of this video. Those are all of the 10 books that I have for you. Let me know if you have read any of these books or if you pick any of them up, what you think of it and how similar you felt it was to my recommendation. With that said, I'm gonna go. Subscribe if you would like to, and goodbye.